Good evening. It's John's D&D vlog, episode number 25, Illusions.
So I've talked about a lot of modules. I think I'll talk about more later on, but I think I'm going to do a few episodes just on game mechanics for a while, just for a change of pace. Here's one that I think needs to be talked about a little.
The one thing about Illusions I've noticed the most is that they're kind of mean, you know? When you get into a fight with a hill giant and the hill giant beats them up and they die, it's just a fair fight, you know? But when it comes to illusions, you can really be mean as a DM with them. So, I mean, that's kind of part of the fun, but at the same time, you want your players to have a good time too. Concerning illusions, you got to be a little bit understanding with your players because from their perspective, everything that they hear about your world is what comes out of your mouth, right? So sometimes it's going to be very hard for your players to discern where your narration of a story ends and where your lies, the description of an illusion, begins. I heard a talk by Garrison Keillor once who called himself a liar. That's what he does for a living, a professional liar. So the whole thing about your players being able to tell where the narration of a story ends and the lies begin, it's all a lie. Everything that's coming out of your mouth is a lie. So you have to give your players some kind of a line, some kind of a chance, some kind of a something where they can see through the lie possibly, right? So we're going to talk about that in a little while. But the main thing that the players need to be aware of is that they can disbelieve an illusion, right? New players don't know this. When you first walk into the game, this is like one of the parts of game mechanics that a player needs to hear about from the get-go before the game even begins. Otherwise, when an illusion does finally show up, it's too late to tell them. Because once you tell them while there's an illusion on, everybody knows, oh, there's an illusion going on, so I have to disbelieve. So you have to teach your players from the beginning, when they very first start playing the game, how to get through an illusion. Which is too bad. It takes a lot of the fun out of it, right? When it comes to illusions, it always seems that the seasoned players have more fun. I went through the first and the second edition Player's Handbooks, and I found all the spells that had illusion as one of their schools. What you're going to notice is that all the different illusions, they're actually quite different, you know. Most of them here, they affect sight, but there's also others that affect sound, touch, smell, taste. As a rule, the more of the different senses it affects, the higher the level the spell is. There's even some spells that affect reality, but I mean, you can learn all this stuff just by studying your player's handbook. So your body, right? You can do a lot of stuff voluntarily. You can get up and walk around, you can pick things up, you can read. But then there's a whole bunch of other things that you can do that are like involuntary. You don't have to tell your heart to pump. You don't have to tell your lungs to breathe. You don't have to actually get into your brain and figure out where you're going to store different memories. Your brain, your body, it takes care of a lot of stuff automatically. In my humble opinion, you should have some involuntary means from time to time to protect you from illusions, right? The act of disbelieving takes a full round, and you have to say it out loud that you're actually going to do it. But there are times when a person should actually naturally look at a thing, realize it's weird, and then kind of have a flash of intuition that maybe this thing should be disbelieved. But, I mean, the player sometimes won't realize that, but honestly speaking, the character should have that opportunity, you know? Anyway, so here's a good article I found in Dragon Magazine, issue number 43. So in it, he suggested another chart, and this chart is basically an auto-disbelief chart. I call it an intuition chart. There are differences between the knowledge of a PC and his character. A chart like this is how you can show that difference. Honestly speaking, the only time I would use this chart is if the PCs are in a situation and they don't see the solution, and not finding that solution could lead to some catastrophe. I kind of think about this chart as an okay, I'll give you one last chance chart. Today's vlog is about illusions, but you could use this chart about anything. So like if they're being lied to, or if someone needs a good idea but they can't think of one. If something happened in the past that they need to remember that information but they just can't. So those are the instances where I would consider using this chart. This isn't the actual chart from the magazine. The story, the original chart is called Now You See It, but is it really there? It was a good article. It was written by a guy named Philip Myers. I liked it. My chart's a little more complex than his, but in my opinion, mine is a little easier to use. It isn't actually a chart, it's just an equation. If you look up in the top right, you can see it. Just take half the PC's intelligence, multiply it by the obviousness level of the situation, and then add his wisdom to it. The obviousness level is about how obvious the solution to the current problem happens to be. Regarding illusions, here's some examples. So like 1, you've got an illusionary pen on a desk. The average person, if they look at it, they don't even notice that it's there. They just don't even care. So of course they're not going to suspect it to be a potential illusion, right? So that would have an obviousness level of about 1. But then a bunch of PCs are walking through the woods and they come up against a bear, right? As a rule, bears run away. They don't confront people unless it's either accident or if they're really hungry or whatever. But anyway, it's pretty rare for a bear to actually show up when you're walking through the woods. So I would give this a little bit higher of an obviousness level, maybe 3 or 4. And then like another example would be like if you're walking through a huge city in a really highly densely populated region, and a huge giant red dragon pops up out of nowhere and lands in front of you. This would be weird, As a rule, the local law enforcement or the military or something would take care of the dragon before it ever got to you. So the obviousness level of this would actually be pretty high, like maybe 8 or 9. It would have a very high potential for being recognized as being an illusion. In the article, he uses 6 obviousness levels. Me, I use 10. It's just what I chose. It's good for math. So what would happen if your PC happened to have an intelligence of 10 and a wisdom of 10, and the illusion that he was looking at had an obviousness level of 1, right? So it would be like this. You take his intelligence and you divide it by 2, so that's 5. And you multiply it by the obviousness level, and that's 1, so it still is 5. And then you add his wisdom to it, so 10, right? So if he was looking at an illusionary pen on a desk, there's only a 15% chance that he would consider believing that it might possibly be an illusion. And then from there, right, once he actually has that suspicion, once his intuition kicks in, then if he wants to, he can roll his disbelief roll, right, his saving throw or whatever, right? The article says, and I agree, if a trusted friend is telling you that something is an illusion, no matter what illusion you're looking at, or no matter what weird problem you have to deal with, all automatically the obviousness level of that situation goes up to 10, and then you get to try again. I mean, this is intuition, right? So you can do this over. I'd say you could do this repeatedly within one round. It's my opinion. Like I said, though, I would only use this chart if the PCs just simply can't find a solution to the problem and you're feeling like giving them a second chance. This isn't the Bible. This isn't law. This is just you having an excuse to give them a break. The only other thing I really have to say about illusions is how you get rid of them. And sometimes it's not obvious. I know it sounds obvious and you think it's obvious, but so like in one instance you've got a wizard who's casting phantasmal force. Where do you cast the dispel magic? You cast it at the illusion, right? But then you've got a Lamia who's casting some kind of an illusion. Where do you cast the dispel magic? Well, supposedly after she drains your wisdom, you cast dispel magic on the guy who's had his wisdom drained, right? Well, doesn't that also mean that you have to cast dispel magic at the people who are affected by the illusion as well? All I'm saying is sometimes it's not clear cut where you need to aim the dispel magic, right? When I was playing, the guys would always look at the Lamia who was in some different shape, like either a little girl or an elven maid or whatever, and they would think the thing that they wanted to do was to cast the dispel magic at the Lamia itself. But the way I interpreted it was that the Lamia exuded that illusion, that somehow it was a chemical something or other that affected the men themselves. So if they wanted to get rid of the illusion, they had to cast Dispel Magic on themselves, right? Which a lot of people would disagree with, but what I see as, I mean, it's a natural ability for the Lamia, so I had them dispel the illusion of the Lamia in the same way that they got their wisdom back after it had been drained. Illusions aren't cut and dried. You have to think things through. And not only do you have to think things through, but there's also a little bit of subjectivity involved in it. You have to do the thing that makes sense to you. And just keep all that in mind. Today's blog's pretty short. That's good. I've been doing a lot of big ones lately. I hope it's been helpful. Anyway, this is Jonathan Scott. It's Jonathan's D&D vlog. I'll see you next week. Have a good day.